above the clavicle varies very considerably, but is generally about 2.5 centimeters. It may, however, extend as high as 4 or 5 centimeters, or, on the other hand, may scarcely project above the level of this bone. In order to mark out the anterior borders of the lungs, a line is drawn from each apex point, 2.5 centimeters above the clavicle and rather nearer the anterior than the posterior border of sternocleidomastoideus, downward and medialward across the sternoclavicular articulation and manubrium sterni, until it meets, or almost meets, its fellow of the other side at the midpoint of junction between the manubrium and body of the sternum. From this point the two lines run downward, practically along the midsternal line, as far as the level of the fourth costal cartilages. The continuation of the anterior border of the right lung is marked by a prolongation of its line vertically downward to the level of the sixth costal cartilage, and then it turns lateralward and downward. The line on the left side curves lateralward and downward across the fourth sternocostal articulation, to reach the peristernal line at the fifth costal cartilage, and then turns medialward and downward to the sixth sternocostal articulation. In the position of expiration the lower border of the lung may be marked by a slightly curved line with its convexity downward, from the sixth sternocostal junction to the 10th thoracic spinous process. This line crosses the mid-clavicular line at the sixth and the mid-axillary line at the eighth rib. The posterior borders of the lungs are indicated by lines drawn from the level of the spinous process of the seventh cervical vertebra down either side of the vertebral column, across the costal vertebral joints, as low as the spinous process of the 10th thoracic vertebra. The position of the oblique fissure in either lung can be shown by a line drawn from the spinous process of the second thoracic vertebra around the side of the thorax to the sixth rib in the mid-clavicular line. This line corresponds roughly to the line of the vertebral border of the scapula when the hand is placed on the top of the head. The horizontal fissure in the right lung is indicated by a line drawn from the midpoint of the preceding, or from the position where it cuts the mid-axillary line to the mid-sternal line at the level of the fourth costal cartilage. Trachea. This may be marked out on the back by a line from the spinous process of the sixth cervical to that of the fourth thoracic vertebra where it bifurcates. From its bifurcation the two bronchi are directed downward and lateralward. In front, the point of bifurcation corresponds to the sternal angle. Esophagus. The extent of the esophagus may be indicated on the back by a line from the sixth cervical to the level of the ninth thoracic spinous process, 2.5 centimeters to the left of the middle line. Heart. The outline of the heart in relation to the front of the thorax can be represented by a quadrangular figure. The apex of the heart is first determined either by its pulsation or as a point in the fifth interspace, 9 centimeters to the left of the midsternal line. The other 3 points are a. the seventh right sternocostal articulation, b. a point on the upper border of the third right costal cartilage, 1 centimeter from the right lateral sternal line, c. a point on the lower border of the second left costal cartilage, 2.5 centimeters from the left lateral sternal line. A line joining the apex point, a, and traversing the junction of the body of the sternum with the xiphoid process represents the lowest limit of the heart, its acute margin. The right and left borders are represented respectively by lines joining A to B and the apex to C. Both lines are convex lateralward, but the convexity is more marked on the right where its summit is 4 centimeters distant from the midsternal line opposite the fourth costal cartilage. A portion of the area of the heart thus mapped out is uncovered by lung and therefore gives a dull note on percussion. The remainder being overlapped by lung gives a more or less resonant note. The former is known as the area of superficial cardiac dullness, the latter as the area of deep cardiac dullness. The area of superficial cardiac dullness is somewhat triangular. From the apex of the heart, two lines are drawn to the midsternal line, one to the level of the fourth costal cartilage, the other to the junction between the body and xiphoid process. The portion of the midsternal line between these points is the base of the triangle. Latham lays down the following rule as a sufficient practical guide for the definition of the area of superficial dullness. Quote, "Make a circle of 2 inches in diameter around a point midway between the nipple and the end of the sternum." Unquote. The coronary sulcus can be indicated by a line from the third left to the sixth right sternocostal joint. The anterior longitudinal sulcus is a finger's breadth to the right of the left margin of the heart. The position of the various orifices is as follows. The pulmonary orifice is situated in the upper angle of the third left sternocostal articulation. The aortic orifice is a little below and medial to this, close to the articulation. The left atrioventricular opening is opposite the fourth costal cartilage, and rather to the left of the midsternal line. The right atrioventricular opening is a little lower, opposite the fourth interspace of the right side. The lines indicating the atrioventricular openings are slightly below and parallel to the line of the coronary sulcus. Arteries. The line of the ascending aorta begins slightly to the left of the midsternal line opposite the third costal cartilage and extends upward and to the right to the upper border of the second right costal cartilage. The beginning of the aortic arch is indicated by a line from this latter point to the midsternal line about 2.5 centimeters below the jugular notch. The point on the midsternal line is opposite the summit of the arch, and a line from it to the right sternoclavicular articulation represents the site of the innominate artery, while another line from a point slightly to the left of it and passing through the left sternoclavicular articulation indicates the position of the left common carotid artery in the thorax. The internal mammary artery descends behind the first 6 costal cartilages about 1 centimeter from the lateral sternal line. Veins. The line of the right innominate vein crosses the right sternoclavicular joint and the upper border of the first right costal cartilage about 1 centimeter from the lateral sternal line. That of the left innominate vein extends from the left sternoclavicular articulation to meet the right at the upper border of the first right costal cartilage. The junction of the two lines indicates the origin of the superior vena cava, the line of which is continued vertically down to the level of the third right costal cartilage. The end of the inferior vena cava is situated opposite the upper margin of the sixth right costal cartilage about 2 centimeters from the midsternal line. End of Section 51.